Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Carlton D. Jenkins, Superintendent, very proud Superintendent of Madison Metropolitan School District. We're here today to have a discussion with our community about our Future Ready 2020 referendum. But however, before we start, I would just like to open up with some comments relative to the recent court verdict of what's happening with Breonna Taylor, one of the individuals who we've been watching across our country that had a very unfortunate situation where she was actually killed, which involved some police officer, which has sparked some real serious civic unrest in our communities, not only here in Madison, but throughout the country and around the world. And I want to let you know that we're very aware of this. And as a community, we're working behind the scenes. I was invited to a meeting today with some law enforcement officers, members of the NAACP, United Way, and others, and we're talking about how do we move forward to seriously address this pandemic of racial unrest in our community. We're committed to doing that. And in doing that, we need our entire community to join forces. We need you to uplift your voices, and we want to uplift your voices because in Madison Metropolitan School District, we have taken a stance that we are definitely going to be in support of any anti-racist practices being employed in our district. We want to make sure the things that we do, that we're putting our children, our staff, and our community in the best position to move forward. We know that there have been many things historically not correct, and we're here to say we're ready to move forward because we're Madison. We're Madison Metropolitan School District, and we know that we lead not only here locally, but throughout the state, the nation, and the world. So having said that, I want you to know that we're going to be here and we're listening to you at all times. Today's presentation is just a part of what we're trying to do to ensure that our students have the best opportunities, that our staff have the best opportunities, that our community, our parents get exactly what they expect and deserve in the interest of moving everyone forward. Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to pass it off to our wonderful principal here, Mr. Matt Hendrickson, to just give you a little bit about what's going on at Madison Memorial High School.
Good evening, Dr. Jenkins. I want to thank you for your thoughts and words, and want to echo your sentiments and comments and a commitment to action as we move forward in this work. And I think we all understand that why we're here is really in support of our students and our community. And as Mr. Jenkins said, I'm Matt Hendrickson. I have the honor and privilege of being the principal of Memorial High School. And before I get us started tonight, I want to introduce a short video, which is going to highlight some of the potential impact for Memorial that the referendum may have. James Madison Memorial High School, or simply JMM, is home to the mighty Spartans, offering classes ranging from algebra to astronomy and hosting our district's planetarium. We're a top-rated high school where our diverse student body excel academically and thrive culturally. Memorial High School was built in 1965 and received additions in 1967, 1970, and 1971. The building itself has not changed since then. However, the way students learn and teachers teach has changed. At nearly 90% capacity, we must creatively work together to maximize our current space, to prepare for projected growth, and to ensure a stimulating and supportive learning environment for our future Spartans. After years of extensive research, review, community input, and conversations with Memorial students and staff, we've identified how to upgrade and modernize Memorial High School through the Future Ready 2020 referendum. This is our opportunity to bring Memorial and all the high school buildings to the 21st century with modern, collaborative, and flexible learning environments that support teachers in guiding student inquiry, critical thinking, and dialogue. Safe spaces that are inviting, accessible, and climate controlled, and foster engagement and a love of lifelong learning in a positive climate and culture. Our priorities include a major reinvestment in classroom space with completely renovated art, science, vocational, and family and consumer science labs, plus the addition of 2 new classrooms in the Fine Arts Wing and 7 new classrooms in the Virtual Arts and Applied Technology Edition. Memorial's performing arts area of the building will be redesigned to include the creation of new art and music spaces sized appropriately for curriculum, plus the construction of a completely renovated theater with new practice space. The Library Media Center will be redesigned to increase technology capabilities, and our current Welcome Center will be renovated to ensure it's more accessible and secure. We plan to consolidate office spaces to create flexible space for our student support areas. An upgrade of athletic facilities would mean a complete renovation of Mansfield Stadium, an upgrade to artificial turf for all athletic fields, and a complete renovation of our men's and women's locker room to address conditions and accessibility. We would overhaul the building's mechanical and electrical systems with new sustainable energy heating and whole school air conditioning for a more comfortable learning environment. Energy efficient upgrades to the building including new windows and LED lighting, large solar array, plus upgrades to exterior school grounds including landscaping plan, new signage, asphalt repairs, sidewalks, stairs, and parking lot improvements. Spartan scholars look forward to learning in modern, innovative environments that nurture their desire to be challenged and stimulated. As a school community, we value student-centered instruction that's dynamic and flexible, and instructional spaces that support this are key. You have the opportunity to impact our students with buildings that better reflect the value we place on Madison's growing minds and future citizens, leaders, and workforce. The Future Ready 2020 referendum reflects our scholars' potential and fosters our strong Spartan spirit. We are JMM. On behalf of the students and staff of Memorial, I'm happy to welcome you to our Community 2020 referendum session. Before I introduce our panel of presenters, I'd like to say that for those of you that don't know, I'm also an alumni of Memorial High School and in every way a Spartan for life. And I had just a few years ago, had the opportunity to be part of the 50-year celebration of the opening of Madison Memorial High School. It was wonderful to be able to share with other alumni in celebrating the place we had called home for that period in our lives. In many ways, it was exciting for former graduates to visit the school, see the places and spaces they knew as Spartans. They were able to find their old locker, sit in their old classrooms, lab tables, find their position at center stage in the auditorium. I'm proud to say that I see our wonderfully diverse student body continue the Spartan tradition and taking time to imagine, create, and excel here. We know that it's not only the knowledge that they gain, but the diversity they bring as individuals to this school that makes it such a special place. Yes, schools are about the people, and Memorial truly is a special place, and our future graduates will be exposed to careers and opportunities, many have which yet to be created. Yes, they will be change agents for the future. I see it, and I know that you see it. Our students are talented beyond belief. They bring inspiration to us all. I'm indeed inspired every day. But I'm also at a loss when our students visit other communities and ask why our school doesn't have the same access to 21st century technology and amenities. I really don't have a good answer for them. I see our current students sitting in the classrooms, the same lab spaces, the same auditorium seats that I did over 30 years ago. The Memorial community is deserving of a school facility that matches at its essence the passion and commitment to excellence that our students and staff bring with them every day. We love our students and we want the very best for them, and we always will. However, I do believe we all look forward to the day when that same emotion, that same commitment to equity and excellence is reflected in the quality of the facilities we provide for our students. Because of this, I'm happy you are able to join us tonight, and I would like to thank you for all your continued support of the Memorial community. With that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce some of our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce two of our chief of schools, Mr. Mike Hernandez and Dr. Marvin Pryor. I'd like to introduce Dr. Mike Herding, our interim chief of staff, Kelly Ruppel, our chief financial officer, Chad Weezy, our executive director of building services, and our two school board members here visiting, Chris Caruzzi and Savion Kester, who will be helping us out tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Jenkins.
Mr. Hendrickson, Thank you so much for that fine introduction of our panelists and also just giving us that overview of Madison Memorial High School. And before I start, let me just say my administrative career started in those very halls at Madison Memorial High School. Coming back to Madison, having been gone since 1993, I was so excited. I went to the building, I got out of my car, and I had goosebumps. And right in the midst of my excitement, I said, oh my, it looks the same. I mean, identical. And so, Mr. Hendrickson, you remember you were going to show me to my office, and I said, oh, I know how to get there. And I mean, from 1993, not much at all has changed, but it was still an exciting place back in 93 as it is today. But I tell you, as we get ready to gear up for this referendum, I'm so excited for what can happen for all of our children. We know that November 3rd is going to be major for us in terms of from an election standpoint. But this is also an opportunity for us to step up and let our voices be heard throughout the community and allow our voices to align with what we expect to have for our students, for our staff, and for our community. Back in 93, that was a high expectation for Madison Metropolitan School District and Memorial specifically. We were a highly sought after school then and are now. Things have changed. The diversity within our schools, we've changed quite a bit. But the learning, we continue to try to be innovative. With this particular referendum, what we're looking to not only just make a difference with our operational side, but also with our facility sides. We want to give our children an opportunity to enter into an environment where it actually matches 21st century learning. So having said that, when we start thinking about our 21st century future ready referendum, what we tried to do is to align everything with our core values as a district. We believe in the excellence, have and still do, but we want to be more inclusive with the excellence. We want to address some of our historical challenges of seeing groups of our students, particularly Black and Brown and special ed and ELL, not achieving as they should on par with their other peers, not just here locally, but across the state and in the nation. We want to address that. We want to make sure that our students feel like they belong, that their creativity will be matched with the interests that they have for whatever they want to become in life. And we're very serious in Madison about addressing the racial equity and the social justice issues. That's why we're saying frequently, we're going to uplift the voices of those who have not been heard, and we're going to continue to have our focus on moving forward. Yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but this is a huge opportunity for us to continue to not only just move forward, but to move forward with everyone. Also, as we talk about progress, we see in our district, we have several schools that have moved forward and have too significantly exceeded their expectations. But when we look at Madison Metropolitan School District, we say to ourselves, we want all of our schools. And then to do this and to keep pace with what we're doing and to even accelerate that, we're saying we need everyone to support our ideas, our vision, and not just our ideas and vision, but your ideas and vision. So what we've done, we've gone out in the community and we've had conversations. We've had over 50 sessions where we heard you. We really heard what you were saying. We were seeing all the things that was happening in our community, and we wanted to make sure that we were serving and supporting you. So we took from those 50 meetings and took the over 4,000 responses and said, okay, now we've heard from our community. What are we going to do about it? Let's take this conversation and turn it into an action so that we can be what we should be in Madison Metropolitan School District. But we know truly going out for a referendum, we're in the midst of two pandemics. I mentioned one earlier when I talked about the racial pandemic. It's real, not just here in Madison, throughout the United States, but around the world. We're seriously very aware of that. We know too that COVID-19, the other pandemic, has caused an economic and employment, a health impact on our community that's serious. When we went out and we surveyed our community, we knew that in our community, we needed to engage you to see where you stand. Over 60% of the respondents said, yes, now is the time in the midst of a pandemic that we should move forward. We recognize the other 40%. We honor that. We know that it's tough, but we're going to work through this together because we are MMSD. That's what we do. Now, to address some of the concerns that you may have and to talk about some of the opportunities relative to the two questions. I'm going to pass it off to my colleagues here, Kelly Rupa and Chaz Weezy. And Ms. Rupa, could you take over, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. So Dr. Jenkins said it best. What we need to do is be making sure that we are supporting the whole child in a well-rounded experience, supporting the academic acceleration of our youth. And in order to do that, we've put forward two questions on the November 3rd ballot. These two questions are not coincidentally on the ballot together. They hold together. Our operational budget is needed in order to support the programming and acceleration in academics for our youth. And our facilities, our climate of our school, our culture of our school are grounded in the facilities and the experience of our kids that they experience. So these two questions are critically important together. I'll spend some time talking about question number one and hand it over to Chad for question number two. This is the language you'll see on the ballot for November 3rd for question number one, what we're calling the operating referendum. What this is it's a request, a question for you, the community. Do we have your permission to increase property taxes above and beyond the state law? So there's a state law in place called the revenue limit, and the revenue limit controls what we're allowed to charge in property taxes, which is what we rely on for our budget. Unfortunately, that law has not kept up with inflation and has tended to be political at the state capitol, which has created underfunding in public education statewide and here in Madison. So the request is for this year, $6 million in the 2021 school year to support our operating budget in light of COVID-19 and our ongoing operational needs. For year two, which would be 21-22, $8 million, year three, $9 million, and year four, $10 million. It's a cumulative of $33 million. So why do we need that? The answer is we need to bring local control to public education back to Madison. Year after year, state aid, we've lost 15% in state aid every year for multiple years in a row. And we continue to see destabilization of our revenue limit at the state capitol. At this moment, we still aren't sure what our revenue is for this current school year, as the state capitol debates whether a state budget repair bill is needed while we're in the middle of a school year. So what we need is to bring revenue authority to the Board of Education. The board then will decide what taxes are needed in each year. They do not need to tax, all of which is provided in this referendum, but it does give them the ability when the school district needs it to use that authority. So what would we spend it on? We would spend it on youth and accelerating outcomes. And in order to do that, one of the main priorities of our new superintendent is investing and focusing on early literacy. That includes an entire curriculum purchase for reading, focusing on reading with new materials and deep professional development for our teachers in line with the science of reading. And we will launch the first full day 4K pilot program that this board and our community has been talking about for years. We're going to get that off the ground in 2022 with a pilot program. We're looking at daily world language for our middle school students, such that they're prepared for more advanced world language in high school and can get college credit by the time they've hit college to be in more advanced world language. Programming in arts, music, science, technology, we know has not had the investments that we would like to do here in Madison. It's an area of focus of the school board. And of course, attracting and retaining our high quality teachers remains a top priority of our school board and remains critical for the academic achievement of our students. In addition to that, we have strategic equity projects that have been tried and true in the last few years, developing outcomes for students, proven outcomes, including our early college STEM Academy curriculum, when it's culturally relevant for students, matters, and our restorative justice programs across our schools. They're things that are working and we know we need further investment. So what does this look like for the average homeowner or property taxpayer? Well, for every $100,000 in home value in year one, this year, it would be $27. So for this year. So if you have a $300,000 home, which is about the average here in Madison right now, you would multiply the 27 times 3. Over the next 4 years, that would incrementally increase. So it would not all be in 1 year. The next year, you would see another increase of $27 for every $100,000, and that would increase over the next 4 years. So I'm going to hand this over to Chad to talk about facilities, and I'll be back to answer any questions you have in just a bit.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. So as Kelly mentioned, I'm going to kind of walk us through question number 2. Do my best to kind of give everyone an idea what we've got in mind for our projects at Memorial, but first wanted to start by just having us kind of walk through what eventually will be in this entire package. So similar to Kelly, we want to just make sure that the public had an idea of what they'd see on the ballot. I'm certainly not going to take my time or your time to read all the way through this. But as you can see here, there's a ton of detail, and that's important. So the voters are as informed as possible if they're when they're making their decision on whether or not to vote in favor of this referendum. The number that stands out on this long paragraph is 317 million. That would be the total bond that we'd eventually ask for in terms of all the projects that are actually in this package. Next slide. So I think the best way for us to try to explain this in a concise manner is to try to break these projects into 3 different categories. So first, on that $317 million, we're recommending at about $280 million be reinvested into our 4 comprehensive high schools. So that is East La Follette, West, and Memorial. We're here tonight with a Memorial focus, where we do $70 million of maintenance and improvement work to the Memorial facility. I've got some ideas that we've worked on with Matt, his staff, and the community, ideas that could certainly be subject to change post-referendum, but we've got budgets in good place, and we've got good direction on where these projects are headed. And if you're interested in any of the other projects relative to the referendum, our website is fully up to date. If you Google MMSD Future Ready, everything you'd want to know about these projects and more is available there. It's the first link you'll find on a Google search. Second, we're proposing moving out of 2 of our locations where we've got off-campus high school alternatives, Capitol High School East and Capitol High West. You actually have Capitol West right across the street from Memorial High School in a renovated storefront, where there are students who used to go to Memorial High School, for one reason or another, needed a smaller environment. And that is just what Capitol High School is. It's a smaller place where it's easier to build those personal relationships that are so important to many of our students. And unfortunately, we're sending those students across the street to a renovated storefront, a building that is too small for their needs, doesn't have science facilities or art facilities, doesn't have a gym, has no space for outdoor learning. And quite honestly, those kids matter much more than the facilities we're putting in them. And I think we're sending them a message by sending them to that school every day. So we are proposing combining Capitol High East, which is in the 3rd floor of Lapham Elementary, and Capitol High West, which is across the street from Memorial High School, merging those 2 programs to a central location at the Hoyt building, which is just up the road from West High School. Hoyt is an old elementary school built in the 50s that currently has MSCR and MSCR programming in it. We would look for a new location for those MSCR adults and the programming that would go along with it. And we would renovate the Hoyt building and give Capitol High School a permanent home, a home that would do many of the things I just mentioned that are absent across the street from Memorial. A home with a science lab, a culinary kitchen, a home with an art lab, a phy-ed space, with a gym, an outdoor area that would be able for students and staff to access. We're excited about what that could mean for the future of Capitol High School. Also the possibility of a little bit of growth there because that program is quite successful for us and right now is at capacity. The last project I wanted to make sure you were aware was on the ballot is the possibility of building a new elementary school in the south side of Madison, the Rimrock Road area. We have been working for a long time to come up with this plan and have had some exciting steps just take place the last couple months here. So if you're not aware, we currently have over 500 K-5 students living on the south side of Madison in that Rimrock Road area by Badger Rock Middle School that currently get on a bus every day. Most of those students either go to Frank Alice Elementary School or they go to Nuestra Mundo Elementary School, which is actually housed in an elementary school we lease from Monona Grove School District. So we believe we can solve a few issues with this new neighborhood school in the Rimrock Road area. One, we can get ourselves out of a leased space in Monona. the second largest school district in the state, it is not great practice for us to lease an elementary school on a long-term basis. And we'll be doing that with Monona for almost a decade now. And we are ready to find a permanent home for Nuestra Mundo. And I think as important or more importantly, we have ignored the south side of Madison for quite some time and put those 500 students on a bus, 45 minutes or longer to get to those two sites. Our families in that neighborhood have never had an opportunity to walk across the street or walk their son or daughter to school in the morning. It is always bus on and bus back. And if you want to go to the play at Alice Elementary School and you live in the Rimrock Road area, you don't walk to the play like many of our families get to do so. You hop in your car or hop on the bus to go to Frank Alice right now. So we're excited to build a neighborhood school in that neighborhood if this were to pass. A couple things that have happened recently that we feel good about in terms of making sure that we had as many of these pieces in place prior to the referendum. The school board recently voted that this will be a neighborhood school, meaning that we would move Frank Alice, the students, the staff, and the attendance area into that new site in South Madison, vacating Frank Alice Elementary School, which would then leave a place, an entire building for Nuestra Mundo to move into. So we'd be solving a couple issues there. The other piece that we recently just had the school board vote on this week, we've come to terms with an initial agreement to actually purchase Badger Rock Middle School and the land around it. And that would actually be the site where we build that new elementary school. So once again, we'd be getting out of another leased arrangement because right now we don't own Badger Rock Charter School, we lease it. And we'd have another facility to own, and we'd have another K-8 site similar to Toki Orchard Ridge, Blackhawk Gompers, Hamilton Van Nuys, and have another K-8 site that would be in that neighborhood. So we're excited about that as well. That bottom footer kind of there just mentions the fact that we heard the community loud and clear around how important the carbon footprint, sustainable projects, and green design was to everybody. And I mean, almost all 50 sessions Kelly and I attended with the team, we heard that loud and clear. The school board made a decision to change these projects from $315 to $317 million as a result of that feedback. And I can tell you that all 317 million, not just 2 million, all 317 million will have a focus on sustainability. Just met with our design team again today. They are predicting at least an immediate 27% savings on our energy costs just by the basic renovations of upgrading our heating and cooling system. And then we can stack on new windows, a new solar array, new LED lighting. So we feel really good about the fact that these are green and sustainable projects. Next slide. Similar to what Kelly did, we just want to make sure we're perfectly transparent in terms of tax impact around these projects. So on that $317 million of borrowing, and that's what that is, we would have about a $50 a year impact on taxes per $100,000 in home value. That it would be paid off after 22 years, just like you would on a paying off a car or paying off a home. And eventually we would own that debt. So all the improvements that we put into all of these projects, we would have paid off after 22 years. It should be said if it doesn't come up, this is actually subject to a little bit of change. These are fairly conservative estimates. We feel like we are going to get historically low rates when we borrow this money. So there's a chance that that number is actually a little bit lower if we were to actually pass the referendum. All right, additionally tonight, and I'm going to do my very best to keep this short so we can answer as many questions as possible. I did want to walk everyone through what will be the proposed improvements at Memorial High School. And I'm going to, like I said, we've got $70 million here and a couple floors on a very big site. So I'm not going to get into the detail on a lot of these. I'm certainly available to answer questions as they may come up. I'm hoping most of our listeners tonight are familiar with Memorial High School and will be excited around some of these proposed improvements. As you look at this schematic drawing, everything in here light blue means there will be a renovation. It means we likely will not take down walls and will not be stripping down things all the way to to the studs, but you would see in all of the light blue areas completely renovated instructional spaces. So things like new flooring, new lights, new ceilings, new wall finishes, integrated technology, new windows, new heating and cooling system, and in general, just a major upgrade to that space that Matt kind of led off with that has not been touched in many cases in 50 years. That's everything light blue. Everything dark blue, we have budgeted for major renovation, which means we'd have the ability to take down walls and strip the building down right to its core and build it back up. You will see that in a lot of spaces like our bathrooms and our locker rooms, our science and art labs, and our theater, which I'll get to in a second. Everything red on this diagram is new construction. And as Matt talked about in that video, Memorial is already full. Memorial has a hard time right now scheduling the classes they've got, making sure teachers have maybe even a prep period in a class to prepare for the next class that might come in. Many of the teachers Matt have teach in 2 or 3 classrooms because the building is so tight right now. And Memorial's projected to grow in the next decade or two, and we made sure we accounted for that with these plans. So we're excited about some of the, I think, double wins that happen through these project proposals. So on the far east side of the building here, this would be the side towards the practice fields. We're actually proposing a 2-story addition. If you're familiar with Memorial, there's actually a little bit of a hill here, a grade change from the east end of the building down to the applied technology area that's adjoining Mansfield Stadium. And that's problematic. It's not super accessible. Matt and the Memorial staff could have students during winter that have accessibility needs and need to get out there, and they are going outside to get to another part of Memorial High School. We are proposing a 2-story addition that and we'll work with the staff and we'll work with the students here on what this eventually becomes. Right now, we're proposing some flexible classroom spaces, some new art rooms, some science, tech, engineering areas, and a new applied tech classroom. But once we get to the kind of the programming phase around the construction timeline, we'll continue to work with Matt and his staff around what should go there. But we know a new addition needs to go there. We know a new instructional space is necessary at Memorial High School to meet the needs of that growing capacity and connect those 2 pieces of the building. This would finally be accessible. So a student who has accessibility needs now would be able to get to that other area of the building down here in the light blue. 2 stories, we'd have a switchback ramp and a corridor there. So you'd have the ability to get to both of those stories with the new addition. As we kind of get into the middle of the building here, you'll see all of our instructional spaces, including the pool. We've put money aside for interior renovations, as I mentioned before. We have decided to make a little switch, and you'll see what happens here on the 2nd floor, to rebuild and expand the current weight room. Matt, the weight room at Memorial High School right now is quite frankly way out of date. A retrofit shop area. It's kind of cut up in a couple portions of the building, and we'd like to centralize that and rebuild it. And also everything here, these locker rooms, also original and not terribly useful. They don't build locker rooms like these anymore. It's hard to get a wheelchair through these. The lockers are either too big or too small. They may be broken up and not terribly usable right now. There are not all gender changing spaces in any of these locker rooms. All of those would come along for the ride with these renovations. All the new locker rooms would be built to 21st century standards in terms of what we're seeing in the K-12 environment right now. And that would include individual showering areas, all gender changing spaces, all gender bathrooms. The locker rooms would be built flexible for Title IX considerations in terms of what teams use which locker rooms during the season. So we're excited about those improvements there as well. As I work my way a little bit further west, a few things on here to highlight. You heard Matt talk about a completely renovated LMC and kind of multi-use, multimedia space. If you're familiar with Memorial, we'd redo that small theater. It isn't accessible right now, so we'd actually probably put a lift in it so you get to both levels of that theater. We consider the possibility, if money came in right, actually raising the roof in the cafeteria and common space, which right now has pretty low ceilings, not a ton of natural light on certain sides. One spot we're really excited about here, if you know Memorial, this is a broken down, currently often flooded courtyard at Memorial High School, and we'd actually enclose that and have a new lobby space where you could enter from the south side of the building, walk through that circulation space, and get yourself to the renovated theater and get yourself to the basketball court. Right now, you've got to kind of weave your way through the academic area to find your way to those spaces in the middle of the building. We don't consider that terribly community friendly. It can cause issues with supervision and access. And this would actually give kind of a multi-use collaborative space in the middle of the building. High ceilings, renovated courtyard, lots of windows, and could really be a neat feature that right now is underutilized space in the middle of Memorial High School. Lastly, on the first floor, I know lots of folks are interested in this. We have budgeted for a complete renovation of the existing theater, along with a second-story addition of a balcony. We believe we'd add 100 to 150 seats with this addition of the theater on the balcony. And if any of you have been in the renovated theater at East High School, it would be built on kind of on par with that, where we would completely strip the theater down. New lighting, new rigging, the potentially of a new higher proscenium, higher fly heights, and new seats. You may hear from some folks tonight around the uncomfortable seats at Memorial High School. Added ADA accessibility. Right now, it's not a terribly accessible space. So that is one big component of the Memorial project. And then lastly, on the first floor, we would do an addition kind of out towards Jefferson, where we nearly double the amount of choral, orchestra, and band practice space. If you saw in that video, we've got a band classroom where there's almost hardly any room for our band program to sit. There's no musical storage. The mechanical system's quite loud and not reliable, and we would build an addition to incorporate those needs in terms of the feedback that we heard. Also, a small scene shop, some storage area, a ramp to make sure that the stage isn't accessible off the back there. I should mention when I head to the second floor here, we also have money set aside for a complete renovation of Mansfield Stadium that would include field turf, a widened and new track for a regulation soccer field. And we are seeing these field turf upgrades pop up in all of our area communities. These are wonderful also community spaces where right now Mansfield's kind of protected. That field catches a couple rainy nights on a soccer or football game and it's kind of done for the year. A field turf field would allow for community rentals, anything from lacrosse practice to ultimate frisbee practice to FIAD class to band practice could take place on that field. On the second floor here, and we'll get through here as quickly as possible, a complete redo of all of our science labs. This is that math area where we tried to do away with some of the temporary walls. This would get upgrades as well. Here's the second floor of that enclosed courtyard. Major classroom renovations over on the southwest portion of the building there. There's that balcony in that addition. And then an interesting feature here right now that we're considering is a second floor hallway or circulation space that would actually make the upper gym at Memorial High School accessible. Right now, if you're a student that has accessibility needs, there's no way to get access to that upper gym. And that is a non-negotiable when we're done with these projects. Memorial High School needs to be 100% accessible. So we're considering a corridor on the second floor there that would give you access to the balcony, an elevator on the front end of the building there, and then second story space that would get you to that upper gym. That is my quickest runaround. I'm sure there are things that I missed. I'll certainly answer questions if they come up. As I said, all of these things are up on our website with all kinds more detail than I shared with you tonight.
Thank you, Chad. And I'll wrap this up just by acknowledging that if both questions were to pass on the November 3rd ballot, we understand that this is a cumulative ask of both questions on the local taxpayer. So what that would look like is a $60 increase for every $100,000 in home value when you add these together, or it would accumulate to $130 for every $100,000 in home value by the time we hit year 4. So it would incrementally increase over time. So I just wanted to make sure that was out there. And if there are any questions about the finance side, I'd be happy to take those. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to our board members to facilitate questions.
Thank you so much for a really detailed presentation, Chad and Kelly. I really appreciate the level of the attention to detail on both sides of these questions. And so with that, we do have a few questions prepared for Chad, Kelly, Dr. Andrew Statz, and Dr. Jenkins. Let's start with this one, Kelly. So didn't we just have a facilities referendum a few years ago? And what is different about this one?
Sure. We did have a facilities referendum back in 2015. And that facilities referendum was for $41 million. So it was actually a really pretty small facilities referendum for a district our size with a tax base of $29 billion. That referendum was designed to take care of kind of immediate needs in a couple different schools, including schools that were over capacity and accessibility needs, putting in some elevators and ramps. It did not come anywhere near taking care of the needs of our overall school district and bringing our schools up to 21st century learning. What we heard when we went to a referendum and we got feedback from the community, even before the question went to ballot, our community told us then in the feedback sessions that we were not thinking big enough and that the ask was too small. The decision of the board at the time was that this was going to be our first step in the water and that they were going to build a long-range facility plan, which would drive the referendum strategy for the future. So what you see in front of you tonight is the first major investment tied to that long-range facility plan, which is on our website. And we know we have a lot to prove to our voters and our taxpayers in these projects, and we aim to do just that. But it is time to kind of invest in the high schools, and the feedback we got from the community was to start with the high schools.
Thank you. Yeah, our district certainly seems to be at an inflection point for change, and these referenda will certainly accelerate that in a positive motion forward. Andrew, can you discuss Memorial's enrollment growth projections?
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Andrew Statz, Executive Director of Accountability, and that department includes our research team and our enrollment team. And they are responsible for producing 5-year and 20-year projections for the district. Memorial is going to face some really interesting pressures when it comes to student growth. You never want to take a high school over 90% capacity. You want to keep that capacity about 90% to allow for flow through the building and to ensure positive and productive learning environments. So last year, Memorial was at 89%. So very, very close to that. As Chad indicated, there's not exactly a lot of extra room at Memorial right now because you don't want to go past that 90%. In about 5 years, they're projected to be at 95% capacity, past that 90. And then with a 20-year projection, we actually are looking at about 105% capacity. So clearly headed to overcrowding should we not engage in additional construction of spaces and so on. So this is driven by residential development north of Olson Elementary on the far west side. A lot of new houses will produce a lot of new students from MMSD. And that's really why you see all of these space renovations as well as additional classrooms in the Memorial plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our next question comes from someone viewing us live, from Peter. Why does the facilities referendum call for spending the same amount of money on each high school when the needs for each high school do not appear to be quite the same?
Savion, you want me to try to answer that initially, or?
Between Dr. Jenkins and you, Chad?
Okay, well, I can go ahead first, and then Chad, if you want to finish it up. But I think,
Absolutely.
First of all, thanks for that particular question and the prior question in which Kelly had an opportunity to answer. As the district, when I was coming in as superintendent, and I always look at what's the fiscal position of the district and what has been past action and what's future planning. And as you heard Kelly mention about taking a long view of where we're headed with our facilities, even though in 2015 we did the $41 million referendum to address some immediate needs. And you heard Chad earlier talking about the fact that some of our buildings, you're talking about 50 years old, 100 years old, and some of the original fixtures, which we know that science has changed itself, and the efficiency of our operations have also changed facilities. And so we had to do some real quick a few years ago maintenance, and now we're looking out. Over the years, we've done different things at different schools in terms to address some of those issues. And in truth, being that the buildings are 100 years old, 50 years old, we have more than $70 million worth of needs in each one of the buildings. But what we've done, still trying to be fiscally responsible, we went out to the community, had over 50 sessions, and we listened to the community talk to us about the needs of the individual buildings as well as for the district. That gave us some insight to say, hey, we'll take the first step in making this ask that we need to ask, but we wanted to be responsible in doing it. Realizing too, even then, we didn't have a whole notion of COVID-19, but we're in the midst of COVID-19 right now. We're in the midst of civic racial unrest, but the buildings came together knowing that they had more needs than the $70 million, but they've been given the opportunity to put voice into design and prioritize the needs that they have for each of the schools. So if we had the opportunity to get all of what we need, as you look around in our surrounding areas, there are some buildings that they've gone up $200 million for one building. We're not doing that. We're still trying to be fiscally responsible, take it in phases, and get us to where we need to be. So that's where we are right now. And that's why you see $70 million. Sure, you can look at East and we can make an argument for more money, but we can look at Memorial. We can look at Capital. That's where we are right now. So it was just based upon trying to be fiscally responsible and saying, take the $70 million, but check this out, and Chad will talk about it. The students, staff, parents, and the community will get an opportunity to weigh in on where we are if this referendum passes. So I'll pass it off to you there, Chad. I think I probably said enough.
Yeah, Dr. Jenkins, I think you said as much as I wanted to say and more, certainly well said. I can't reiterate enough that you're correct. If we're actually looking to improve the educational environment at these sites, not just build them back to what they were, there's more than $70 million of work to do at each of these facilities. If we had a new high school that was 5 or 10 years old, there's no way we take a universal approach and go $70 million a piece. That's not the case. All of these buildings have essentially been ignored since the 1970s, every single one of them, which means many of the assets that exist in all 4 of our high schools are way past their useful life. The only major renovations that we've seen, we did a heating and cooling project at West High School, and we took on the theater and a spectator gym at East kind of recently. Other than that, these buildings haven't really been touched since the 70s, which means all the stuff we've got is that old. And there's a need for kind of a universal strategy to make sure all of our buildings have windows and good lighting, great heating and cooling. And then the added piece is all the fun stuff, the instructional stuff, the things that will be exciting in terms of renovating these learning spaces. And Dr. Jenkins, to your point, Kelly and I did all 50 of these things. There wasn't one of these meetings that we had someone from some attendance area saying, hey, East is the biggest, East should get the most. Hey, Memorial's got the hands down the worst theater right now, and the heating and cooling system is terrible. We think Memorial should probably have a little bigger piece of the pie. Hey, West needs a pool. Can West get $90 million? And that was really something that the school board and our team eventually decided the need is there for a universal approach to get these things maintained and improve them. And that's where we ended up, quite frankly.
And if I may add one other thing there too, Mr. Castro, not only did we take it and we're looking at giving these $70 million to make some real enhancement to increase not only just the facilities, but also the academic opportunities, but we're being fiscally responsible. And we listened to our taxpayers, to our community when they talked about making sure that we doing it in a way that's going to be cost saving to us. And so you heard Mr. Weezy talk about the carbon footprint earlier. What this also does for us, as we're saving money right now in our maintenance budget, we're talking about $5 million right now. We're talking about impacting these 4 high schools. we can begin to divert some of those dollars to our middle schools and to our elementary schools as well, to make sure that we're even being efficient again, just redirecting the dollars that we already have, but now more attention could be focused on the middle and the elementaries, because we will have up to par those high schools, which touches 33% of our students right off the bat. But ultimately, our 4K students will matriculate through these high school spaces.
Thank you so much. And just to build off that, this is a district that did commit to 100% renewable energy by 2040, I believe, and this is absolutely necessary to that. Going back to the strategic framework, community input is huge in everything for these projects, and determining what each individual school community wants to specifically focus on. I just wanted to follow up with one question, Chad. Can you talk about current building assessments and where these projects will take our buildings to in terms of assessments and grades?
Yeah, absolutely, Savion. So you can look on both our my website, MMSD Building Services, and I believe you can actually find the facilities assessment still on our MMSD Future Ready page. All these facilities were assessed now a few years ago, and our high schools graded out anywhere from a C to a D, and had all kinds of money in terms of what was needed as far as deferred maintenance. And at the time, the architecture and engineering firm gave a price to get these buildings back to a B. And what I can guarantee at this point, when we're done with these, we'd certainly be to a B. And it will be on us to reassess these facilities and also the remaining 46 or 47 sites we own as we plan into the future around kind of what the next common sense buckets of work would be for us to take on in terms of where are the greatest needs and where do we get them. I don't think, just in terms of how we wrote these assessments, minus a new building, anything will ever be to an A. We'll still have 50-year-old brick walls at Memorial High School and 100-year-old brick walls at East, but these buildings will be, I'm thinking, high Bs by the time they're done and reassessed.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Chris.
Thanks, Savion. So in addition to being a school board member, I am also a Memorial parent. I'm in my 5th year of having kids at Memorial, but we've been going to Memorial since my kids were in the earliest days of elementary school. Between the theater, the athletic facilities, and the observatory, Memorial is a hub for our entire community, and these investments are going to reach people in our community well beyond the students and the staff who are at Memorial when they're done. With that in mind, we got a question from Peter about athletic facilities. And that question is, where can we find information on the athletic facilities being proposed? I'm concerned about the amount being spent on athletics. Chad, can you take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Peter. So you can find detailed budget estimates and both our facilities assessments. We went through and did detailed assessments and a needs analysis for each of these high schools once we targeted them with the school board, and related budgets for the proposed improvements on that website. So just Google MMSD Future Ready. We hear you, Peter, in terms of athletics improvements, and wanted to make sure that what we came up for projects proposals was well-rounded and had the whole child and the whole Memorial community in mind when we put them together. Originally, we thought we had money to actually build a brand new $16 million fine arts center. And after we signed on a construction manager and did some more detailed budgeting, figured out that that wasn't in the budget, and we needed to put more money into classrooms. And actually, that 7 classroom addition I shared with you on the west side, the east side of the building, has kind of come through some of the budgets that we've continued to adjust and working with Matt and his staff around the needs of Memorial High School. That being said, Mansfield Stadium is old. It's a concrete and cement structure that is in need of some maintenance work. We originally actually thought we were going to take down Mansfield Stadium and start from scratch. We also made the decision after budget revisions and feedback to go back and actually maintain the cement and steel structure that's there. So we're going to leave Mansfield Stadium where it's at, and we're just going to fix it up so we can get another 50 years out of it, to make sure that we can put more money into the academic settings at Memorial High School. The budget we get has some athletics in it. It's got some art in it too. But we also have a mind on the fact that these are community spaces. We have to make sure that these facilities support a well-rounded experience for all of our students, and also make sure we put as much as we can into the classroom. And that's a delicate balance. And I think we've done the best we can with the project proposals we currently have.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate that answer. Dr. Jenkins, I've got one for you. Can you talk a little bit about your time at Memorial? How is the building and school environment the same, and how has it changed?
Well, actually, as I said, Memorial is where I started off my administrative experience. And at that particular time, just from the pride of Memorial, I think there are some things that's changed and some things have stayed the same. I think there's still a great deal of pride just being a Spartan. And when you heard Mr. Hendrickson talk about when he graduated, and even myself having been there as a staff person, and him saying that made me feel a little proud, because we used to say, hey, once a Spartan, always a Spartan, right? But we know then, and during those times, there were some students who excelled and competed around the world. There are still students there who excel and can compete around the world. But we also had challenges there at Memorial too during that time. But that was the place where I learned about inclusionary strategies, as well as learning about pushing students for advanced learning at Memorial. Those things are still there in terms of pushing for advanced learning. I think as a district and throughout the country, we've been talking more about how can we ensure that our students who are special needs have the attention appropriately in the actual settings that they need to have. That's something that we will be talking about. The historical trend of the African-American, Latinx students, not performance students with language learning. I think from where we were then in 1993, we may have had a few students who were really excelling, but we also had students with challenges. Now it's more exacerbated with this whole thing, particularly with the virtual learning right now. But there were challenges before virtual learnings. But I see this as a big opportunity, this whole pandemic, to bring forth what we need to do in terms of some of those strategies to encourage and get all of our students up to the next level. But I think the staff, and that's something we haven't mentioned much here, but the staff was a fabulous staff then with the reputation, and the staff today, fabulous staff with the fabulous reputation. It was highly sought after going to Memorial. It's highly sought after today. And as you heard, also Andrew mentioned in terms of what's projected for the growth, we're talking about in the next 10 years, you're talking about 18% easily growing in the West Side. So it's going to continue to be a highly sought after school. And now we want to give the facilities a boost to match what we know that's going to be happening with the innovative learning taking place. That's what I would say. So some things have changed, some things are the same, and many things will get better. And I think the more that we continue to show our students and staff and community that we're investing in them, I think that's only going to inspire people to want to do better.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. After being a parent who's been to Memorial for years and years, a couple years back, I went to one of our suburban high schools to judge a forensics tournament. And while the teaching and the students and the faculty at Memorial are amazing, the programs are amazing, but I looked at that other high school and my jaw just about hit the floor. I firmly believe that our kids in Madison deserve the same 21st century facilities that kids in surrounding districts have. So what you said, Dr. Jenkins, absolutely resonates with that vision, and thank you.
Thank you.
Another question, this one's for you, Kelly. Can the community members that live in this part of the district afford this tax increase during COVID-19?
You're muted, Kelly.
Yeah, sorry about that. It wasn't going off for me. I'm here. So I think that's a very good question. And it's a question that the Board of Education took very seriously across all of Madison, not just on the west side of Madison, of course. And that is the reason the board was originally aiming at deciding on going into referendum and the questions and the scope of the questions back in March. But when COVID-19, kind of hit, the board made the deliberate decision to take a pause to evaluate the landscape, evaluate where we are with COVID-19 before making any decisions. So it wasn't until mid to late July that the board decided to move forward. And what they did in order to make sure the timing was right was we went back to the community and we asked. We shared the dollar amounts that we were looking at, and we asked the community if this was the right time. We asked them how they were being impacted and if we should move forward. And what we heard was that both on the operating and the facilities budget, that now is the time. And it was actually more important. On the operating budget, the results of our polling went up. The community told us, we know you have needs and that your needs tied to COVID-19 and your future needs are more important now than they ever have been. And the community said that we need this operating budget. And as it relates to the facilities, we have air handling, HVAC system needs, we have safety and security concerns tied to COVID-19 that we have to address. So now is the time, but as it relates to individuals on that facilities, I think it's important for everyone to know it will never be cheaper to do these high schools. One way or another, these high schools have to be invested in. They're old and they're crumbling as we speak. And if we don't do the investments now, they're going to be more expensive. And I say that because interest rates are lower now than they ever have been. The school district just got a 0.2% on our short-term borrowing, which we do every year, 0.2%. That's the kind of market we're going to be going into with this $317 million bond. We're going to get incredible interest rates because we just got an incredible credit rating. That we have that kind of beneath us. So it'll be more affordable now than it will be. But in addition to that, we're looking at kind of a buyer's market as it relates to construction. The construction projects that have been happening pre-COVID around us at Sun Prairie, Verona, many other school districts around us who have just built new, those construction projects are all ending. So we're going to be entering the market at just the right time, or multiple construction companies, multiple bidders are going to be coming after our projects, which are going to make them more affordable on top of the interest rate. And it gives us the ability to put thousands of people back to work on these projects across the city of Madison. So while I understand and absolutely empathize with what more taxes might mean to an individual at this rate, what I would say to that is it's more affordable now than it's going to be in the future, and kind of keeping the long-term perspective on the investments that these two facility and the operating referendum questions take. I think the community is telling us to move forward.
Chris, I'd like to add one thing to that, because during these times of COVID-19, where we think about a lot of uncertainty, this is truly an unprecedented time. Every school system across America and around the world are trying to retain their highly qualified staff. We know with the increases in expenses that we have, and we know that the loss of revenue that we're going to experience from some of our state and even federal, we know that we must continue to try to invest in our staff. Without the support, then it puts us in a position where we have to move back on some of the effort that we put in over the last several years of trying to recruit a highly diverse staff. And we may be facing some other challenges if not. So I think this is an investment, not only just in our district for right now, but for the future, because we really do. We have a very talented group of individuals we brought in to our district, and we want to retain that staff as we're building and moving forward together.
Thanks so much. So we've got a question from Christine. Thanks so much to our Facebook Live audience, and please keep sending in those questions. Christine wants to know if the pool itself is being updated. Chad, can you take that one?
Yeah, you bet. Christine, we have budgeted for what we're considering to be a light renovation, which means we wouldn't be taking down any walls, but we have money in the budget to redo the deck, new starting blocks, new ceiling, new lights. I think Matt would want the first thing that we would fix would be the leaky roof that continues to cause us issues. So we'd probably do that before we put a new ceiling or new lights in it. And then any of the mechanical systems underneath, the pool pumps, if those are old and need to be replaced at the time that we're actually doing all this, we would do that as well. So entirely new finishes all the way around in the Memorial pool from ceiling to deck.
Thank you, Chad. And Savian, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pivot a little bit. A question from Lori from our Facebook Live viewing audience. What happens to Badger Rock Middle School? And Dr. Herding, if you would like to pick that one up. You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori, for that question. It's a great question. So Badger Rock last school year was given a 5-year charter renewal, so they would continue. And we actually think there'll be some gains for Badger Rock. First of all, they'll now have use of a gymnasium. They will pick up some space. They will also benefit from having the elementary school share the space where the students will be familiar with the building and likely may want to continue on to Badger Rock Middle School. So we currently lease the space from Rooted, and now if the referendum passes, then we become the landowner and they will lease space for us. And we've carefully worked out an agreement to take care of both Badger Rock and Rooted. And our board just passed that this previous Monday night. So thanks for the question.
Thank you so much. And there are so many benefits to having, elementary schools and middle schools linked together, or high schools and middle schools linked together too, just for students to socialize and get to know one another. Another question from our audience, from Michelle. Are the current science rooms getting their space redistributed to have equal size and usable rooms?
Yeah, Savian, I can take that one. Right now we have almost all of our science rooms tagged for major renovation, heavy construction. And what that means is we will have the ability to resize those spaces. And if there is a need, and Matt has a bigger science room in one area, and we know we've got some smaller science rooms that are not ideal. In others, we'd have the ability to resize those spaces. The other thing that's possible, once we get through a full year, and we'll spend a full year with the Memorial staff and students actually designing these buildings. These are ideas to prove that we can do these projects. We hired a construction manager to put numbers to make sure we didn't overpromise in terms of scope. But these projects will not look exactly the same when we're done spending a full year with the Memorial staff and students in terms of how all the walls lay out. There's a chance the science wing, or some of it, ends up in that new addition. There's also a chance the science wing ends up in a different part of the building. So we will certainly make sure that the science labs are up to 21st century standards. A former science teacher myself, I get a little pit in my stomach every time I tour Memorial High School because a few of those rooms are, quite frankly, too small to actually do what's needed instructionally to serve the needs of our students. They're flat out too small to be doing what we ask of our science teachers. So we look forward to making sure that we do it right when we renovate them.
Thank you so much. And building off of that, Chad, could you talk about the level of coordination that will have to take place in terms of timeline and when construction starts, and how we will continue to use these buildings while these renovations are taking place?
Yeah, absolutely, Savion. If for some reason this thing passes in November, we'll have the ticker tape parade. We'll all be excited and have the big old party, and then really the heavy work gets started for me. We're going to have 3 years of really intense coordination at all of these sites to actually pull these projects off. So briefly, and I could talk about this because we've spent countless hours with our construction managers outlining a schedule. Briefly, it would look like this. Referendum passes, ticker tape parade, and the band plays, and all of a sudden it's 2021. We get through kind of that holiday season, and we would spend virtually all of 2021 refining these plans to bid-ready documents. And that would mean many back and forth meetings with our community and staff to make sure that the instructional outcomes, what we want to make sure is reflected in the Memorial community, comes to life in our design. And we want to make sure we get a diverse set of voices in the room to understand what they want in a school when we build these things. And then we spend a year doing that. So we get to 2022, January of 2022, That's when we would send these projects out to bid, and we would name the general contractors who would build them. And then there would be heavy construction the summer of 2022 and the summer of 2023. And from the time we award the bids early in the spring of 2022, all the way through the fall of 2023, so over a full year, the building will be under construction. The heavy stuff will happen during the summer, where we're going to do the loudest work and the environmental work and the work that we need to bring the crane in and enclose the courtyard at Memorial. But there'll also be work happening when we've got instruction going on at Memorial. And it will be important that we coordinate closely with the staff and students to make sure that it's safe, that we keep the heat on, and that we keep the lights on. But it will be a couple years of us kind of having to be good partners to build these projects. So I hope that made sense, but well over a year of full construction, 2 incredibly, really busy summers, and then 1 really important planning year on the front end to make sure we get this right and we hear everybody's voice and the projects reflect what we want to have accomplished at Memorial.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hendrickson, can you talk about what you're most excited for students with these renovations?
Yeah, I think just the opportunity to bring themselves into the 21st century for academic learning. When I think about the possibilities, I'm also very excited about collaborating with our community. To Chad's point, this is the initial phase. Should this go through, we have an opportunity to really envision and re-envision the way Memorial operates in many ways, and getting students to see at the table, to see what it is that they would like to see in a high school. So I'm very excited about those prospects.
Thank you. And Chris has a few more questions to finish us off, I believe.
Thanks, Savian, and thanks, Mr. Hendrickson. So for many years, our family has been going to fine arts at Memorial High School. We started going to the musicals back when my kids were very young. We've been through middle school and high school band and orchestra concerts. And consistently at everything we go to, we hear that the kids are amazing, we hear that the fine arts program at Memorial is amazing, and we hear that the seats in the theater are not amazing. In fact, they are downright painful. Fine arts is very important to so many of our students. And I'm wondering if you can tell me how our fine arts facilities will be improved. What have we heard from our staff, our students, and our community about what they want from our fine arts facilities? And Matt, I'm wondering if you can take that, and maybe Chad, Mike Hernandez, you might have some input on what happened with the East Theater.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, our arts program is phenomenal. And if you've ever been to a band concert, a choir corps, our musicals are amazing. And the current music is one small hallway, about 3 classrooms, and to Chad's point earlier, instruments are piled on top of each other just to make room for students and spaces. So when you look at the additions that are being made, really looking at kind of re-envisioning the whole space as well, doubling it in size, and then bringing an auditorium in that is on par with that at East. So I see nothing but just a phenomenal opportunity for our art students.
Chris, I can add on that just because I kind of living and breathing this stuff every day. And I mentioned this on my quick flyby, but the theater is almost inaccessible at this point. There's like a secret back door to get someone on stage. So there'd be vast accessibility improvements. To your point, Chris, no more sore butts in the seats. We'd have all new seats, all 600 of them on the main deck, and then an addition of another 100 or 150 up in the balcony. The other thing that we would do in the practice space is we're actually planning for individual practice rooms, which Memorial does not have right now. I see Dr. Pryor nodding his head. Every band and choir teacher, it's almost like a non-negotiable. If you're going to build a new practice space, give me some spots in that practice space that if a kid wants to go blow a bunch of squeaky notes on a tenor sax, they can shut the door and do it for a while. And we can't do that right now. We've got essentially 3 kind of above average classroom spaces with no musical storage, no individual breakout space. The acoustics in the area not good at all, and the theater is not accessible. And it's right now kind of on par with what you'd see in a 30 or 40-year-old middle school in terms of the seating and the lighting and the rigging. So we've got lots of room for improvement to support that arts program at Memorial.
Yeah, Chris, I actually just typed in the chat box. I was going to ask Savion if I could put on what I'm excited about to see at Memorial, and it was just going to be this question that you just asked. I had the privilege of seeing the East Margaret Williams Theater go in and open up, and then the excitement that it generated within the entire city. It just revitalized the East Side. And we're consistently and constantly bringing in our community in for different events. The Pride, the students, we saw outstanding numbers going out for one-person plays, the one-person acts, to musicals, to start. I'm just excited about seeing how Memorial is going to be able to begin and use this. Matt and I have walked into that theater several times, just sat down just to talk when we're doing our walkthroughs. And it always comes back to that, as well as just imagining seeing those students up there performing and then looking around and seeing the faces of the community smiling and applauding while being comfortable. That's the big thing.
Thank you to everybody for those great answers. We've been hearing from Memorial students for years and years about the bathrooms at Memorial and how much our students would like to see the bathrooms upgraded. Chad, can you tell us if bathroom renovations are included in the Memorial facilities? And also, along the same line, what are we doing in terms of air temperature control to try to ensure that kids can dress for a day at school without having to put on layers and take off layers from classroom to classroom?
Yeah, I'd certainly be happy to answer both of those. So Chris, in all 4 high school projects, all the bathroom spaces will be completely renovated. Those have been one of the areas for 50 years that have been ignored at all of our high schools. So Memorial would get completely redone bathrooms. I'm not even going to say similar to what Matt and his team were able to coordinate in their common spaces. It's going to be better. They're going to be brand new bathroom facilities. The other thing that we actually have to take into account with the new bathroom design is really a few other factors. One, we want to make sure that we've got bathroom facilities at Memorial that are welcoming and without barriers. And that means gender barriers and accessibility barriers. So we're going to make sure that we've got all gender bathroom spaces available throughout the building. And we're going to make sure that these bathrooms are accessible. A lot of the bathrooms at Memorial High School right now, they were not designed for wheelchair access. So there are only a few bathrooms right now in the building that are made wide enough and accessible for wheelchair access. The other thing that's going to be important to us is kind of designing in a post-COVID world. So the days are kind of probably behind us that we'd redo a bathroom and make you touch a doorknob, a paper towel dispenser, and a sink and a toilet on your way in and out of the bathroom. So we're going to try to make sure that these spaces are also safe as well as accessible. On the heating and cooling side, I can tell you that Memorial is the most needy building of the 50 that we maintain. We had 5 years ago now an issue with bursting pipes that we almost never got ahead of during a cold stretch in the winter. The heating and cooling system is designed right now in a way they would never ever do it in a K-12 environment ever again, with a hot and cold water loop that is almost impossible for us to maintain. So that would be completely gutted and renovated. We would start from scratch on the heating and cooling system. So building-wide air conditioning and a building-wide new highly efficient heating system to make sure that we've got all the controls in space, that we don't have some students walking in and wearing a hat and gloves in the middle of winter in one classroom and go right next door and they're down to short sleeve shirts because there's a 15-degree temperature swing. That is one of the toughest parts of my job is to get calls from Matt's custodian or calls from Matt's staff talking about the dire straits in terms of the actual conditions in the building. That's a non-negotiable for me. Our students should have well-lit and temperate spaces that are accessible to everybody, and that will come out of all these projects.
Thank you, Chad. Kelly, I've got a question for you. So this operating referendum is asking our taxpayers for, as you said, incremental increases in our ability to levy above the state imposed revenue limits. What are we doing to reduce our costs?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And what I want to kind of validate for the community is even if we have a past referendum, we will continue to look for cost reduction strategies across the district year after year. So right now we have a budgeting process where every single year we look at all of our expenses and identify where we can reduce costs such that we can repurpose them for investments and outcomes for kids. So we look for areas of programming that aren't producing the outcomes we expected, and we end programs when we need to. We look for areas of savings in transportation, printing, phones, utilities, all across the district, all across central office. And through that process, year after year, we generate anywhere between 3 and 5, even this year, $8 million worth of savings. And we do that in order to ensure that we can continue to invest in our strategic equity projects while having to balance our budget on what is continuous underfunding from the state. So we will continue, even in a passing budget, that disciplined way of working and identifying areas that we can reduce the budget, find savings, and turn it around and make that every single dollar operate better for kids. We mentioned earlier savings that this referendum will produce on the facilities side. If this referendum were to pass, we free up over $350,000 in lease money alone, which then gets to be returned back to the operating side of the budget. In addition to that, Chad mentioned the utility savings that would be driven from the energy efficiencies of these projects. That returns money to the operating side of the budget. So investing in facilities helps free up the operating side of the budget. Continued good decision-making from the board and the superintendent's level so that we have the resources to invest where we need them, and making the difficult discussions sometimes we have to have in order to ensure that we're closing programs or investments that might not be working for kids. So we'll continue that disciplined way of working, especially with a passing referendum.
Thanks, Kelly. And Savian, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you. And Kelly, just to go off your latest answer, and Chad too, how are the operating budgets and capital budgets linked? So, for example, how are sustainable practices being incorporated into these renovations? How does that affect the operations budget? Is there any money in the operating budget for facilities improvements, and just how those two things intersect?
Sure. So those revenue limits that I mentioned earlier on, in public schools, maintenance budget falls underneath those revenue limits too. That's not the case for all public entities, but it is the case for public schools. That means that those revenue limits and the way they're created continuously force the push and the pull between the investments of facilities, the investments of kids, and the investments of staff. So it's a delicate balance every single budget year. But ultimately, what continuous underfunding from the state has meant that we haven't been able to create the maintenance budget of which we need to maintain 50 buildings that average, 50 to 75 years old across a school district like ours. So we know we need a bigger maintenance budget. But in order to do that, we need to free up funding, as I mentioned, from the leases, the investments in the high schools. A large majority of Chad's budget goes to the high schools right now. So by investing in the high schools, we'll free up more funding for the elementary and middle schools. But as we continue to make better and better decisions on the lease costs and other investments, we'll be able to free up operating budgets. Chad, you probably have some more to add to that question.
No, Kelly, I thought you answered that really well. I think sometimes it's nice to give a little bit of perspective in terms of what our budget looks like right now. So we've got over 4.5 million square feet to maintain on very old commercial infrastructure, and we have about $1 per square foot to maintain those facilities every year. So anyone who may live in a home or maintain any residence, even attempting to kind of prorate only spending $1 a square foot to maintain your house, we're doing that and trying to maintain commercial buildings, which are many times 2 to 3 times more expensive to work on. So we do our very best. We've got highly skilled trade staff that do an amazing job keeping our facilities in the shape they're in. But yes, this will be an added shot in our arm to be able to turn some of the attention in my maintenance budget to the other buildings, because these will be in such great shape for years to come. The only other piece to that around incorporating sustainable practices into these renovations that I didn't mention on kind of my breeze through these projects, we're actually proposing, as I said, a pretty substantial solar array on the roof of Memorial High School. We'd like kind of the diagnostic equipment and all the analytic equipment available for Matt's instructional staff. So a physics or an engineering teacher can actually have real-time data around what's going on with what the solar array is pulling in. And we're actually proposing the possibility of a carbon neutral classroom where we maybe build in uber efficient heating and cooling, lighting, and maybe even some battery storage to have a classroom that the sustainable design that comes to life in these projects will actually be a teaching tool as well. So we are really excited about incorporating as much teaching and learning into even the renovations. So we've got kind of some hands-on real life things we can integrate into the curriculum.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Mr. Hernandez. Let's say someone has a child who attends an elementary or middle school, so they won't necessarily benefit from the proposed high school renovation projects. How will this benefit middle school and current middle school and elementary school students?
I think Dr. Jenkins mentioned this earlier. This actually will benefit our middle and elementary students because eventually they'll be transitioning up. But the beauty of high schools, which is it's an extremely exciting place to work, the beauty of high schools, it's really a 24/7 shop. We have people in the community always in the building utilizing every aspect from drama and dance to plays to futsal, any of those, and Memorial is that centerpiece on the west side in which it's going to be utilized by all aspects of the city. MSCRs that will be able to use it as well. And so it is from 4K to 80 years old. Everybody will be able to use it.
I'd just like to add one other thing. In my conversations with realtors and parents of our youngest learners, you're talking about right at birth, they're already looking at the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools and comparing them to our area. So they want to know if our high schools actually have the same resources, if our middle school have the same resources as our peers in our surrounding districts. So everyone will benefit, in particular, even when you start talking about the investment in your home, your area, you want to maintain that investment, you do it in your school system and you get the results out, that helps with the home sale. And I can tell you coming into Madison, it definitely made a difference just knowing the market here and how competitive it is. And a lot of people do that based upon looking at our schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to go off Mr. Hernandez's point, when I was in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I played basketball and football at the Follett Fieldhouse, and we traveled over to Memorial to play those basketball games too. So for a lot of extracurricular activities, our high schools are a hub for those, even in those lower grade bands. And this next question is for Dr. Jenkins. So given the demands and challenges of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and the temporary switch to virtual instruction, are facilities improvements still a priority?
Well, if you heard, yes, it's still a priority because we're not just looking at the pandemic right now. We're looking beyond the pandemic. When you make an investment like this in your community, you're not just talking about today, you're talking about for years to come. And so in the midst of a pandemic, And as we said, when we surveyed our community, 60% said, yes, now is the time, because we're looking beyond just the spaces that we're in now. And as we go through this and come out of it, we want to have the best spaces. And also we want to have the best resources for our students during this time. And if the pandemic continues to go, one of the things that we have all learned, that did we have the capacity within our buildings, these old buildings, and just being able to connect like we need to connect. And even just 21st century learning, it's not even about the pandemic. We had talked about looking at facilities across the country 5-10 years from now. Some of the things that we're talking about in this particular proposal, we had envisioned, but didn't think that we needed it right now. Well, this pandemic has shown us, yes, you do need it. And we do understand that it's going to be tough for some people, but at the same time, we know it's going to be a great investment for our children and for our community in the future.
Thank you. And I believe that is our last question. And so Dr. Jenkins, Mr. Hendrickson, if y'all would like to close this out.
Mr. Hendrickson, you want to go first? Sir?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I just want to, again, thank the panel and, all the detail that's gone in thus far. I think it's been very informative for our community, and I'm looking forward to where this may go, and hoping that I get to have those conversations with our students and community as we move forward. But I know that this was just initial, there's still some questions out there. So certainly understand that, call my phone, email, check the website. We want to make sure that everyone is getting the information they need. So just to follow up with that, please reach out to us so that we can get the information you need. If I can't get it to you, I'll find someone that can. So with that, I'll close this out this evening, and take care, everyone.
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you to everyone on the panel. Very informed discussions. We hope to all of our viewers out there that we gave you more information or confirmed some of your thoughts, or maybe reconfirmed or gave you more information than you needed to be able to be prepared to go to the polls on November the 3rd. We're here to answer your questions and to calibrate with you. If there's something that you think that we may be doing, that you want more information about, or you may have even a better thought about, please feel free to reach out to us. If you want more information, go on our website, look up on the Chad's department there, as he had mentioned earlier, with that website, and I'll have Chad give to you again, so you can see all of our plans. The financials, they're there. We've been a district that's been fiscally responsible in trying to meet the needs of our students, of our staff, and our community. We will continue to do that. Whatever direction we go with the referendum, we're going to continue to do that. But we thank you. In Madison, you've always been a very responsible community supporting our educational system. And for that alone, we thank you. But we also hope that you continue to be with us as we try to move our district forward. Thank you so much for your time.